Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. If you've been thinking about setting up your own independent consulting practice, visit umbrex.com and click on the link that says Set Up Your Own Firm. We've come up with a guide that includes 90 videos and over 30 tools that you can download, so check that out. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm here today with Lee Frederiksen, who is the founder of Hinge, which is a marketing firm that focuses exclusively on working with professional services firms. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Will.
So, Lee, I'm really interested to explore today the High Growth Study 2020 that your firm
hmm
has just produced. Why don't you tee it up? Tell us a little bit about this survey that you've done.
Okay. Well, we looked at over 1,000 professional services firms of all sizes, from the very smallest single person firms all the way up to the mega firms. They represented, that sample of 1,000 firms represented over $70 billion in revenue and 1 million professionals. So it's a very large and we think pretty representative sample of the consulting market and more generally the professional services market as a whole.
Fantastic. So, give us kind of just the overview of what this study covered, and then we can dive into some of the specifics. What was kind of the main topics that you looked at?
The main topics we're looking at are really those that drive growth. We're looking at your strategy, your marketing, your business development, those things that help you grow the firm. And one of the things we do that's quite interesting and revealing is we look at the high growth firms, those that are growing the fastest, at least 20% compound annual growth rate, and compare them to the slower growing firms and find out what are they doing different. And this helps us kind of zero in kind of based on the reality of the numbers, what's working and what's not working so well.
Fantastic. Um, I guess maybe where I'd love to start is, having done this extensive survey, what is your finding around what are the most effective techniques, which might be different than the ones that people do the most often. But what was your finding around the techniques that are actually most effective
Yeah.
at generating growth?
Well, I think there's a theme to them, and that is really following your clients. Where are your clients looking for information, insight, and help? And the answer more and more has become digital. And so the topics that really are at the top of the list in terms of effectiveness and their efficiency are really those that help you make best use of that channel. So we see things like search engine optimization, mapping the buyer's journey, using digital content, special reports, those kinds of things. Some people refer to this kind of as thought leadership marketing or content marketing is a way of thinking about it. But if you pause for a moment, you realize that what we're actually selling to our clients in the professional services is our expertise, our ability to solve problems and get things done. And the question is, how do you make that expertise visible so the clients can actually see it and understand how you can help them? And that usually gets translated into some form of content.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting to look at the adoption of digital marketing across
hmm
professional services. You have one nice chart in this document that shows the adoption rate. And let me just read this off, actually, because this is kind of interesting to kind of get this full thing out there. This is the percent adoption. I'm not going to read off the numbers for each one, but I'll read it from high to low. So, number one
hmm
was networking on social media, which was 55% adoption, which actually seemed kind of low to me. I'm surprised it's not higher. So that, and then that was the high. Let me read down to the lowest one. So that was the most highest. Then we had email marketing campaigns, blogging, social promotion, keyword research, search engine optimization, webinars, case stories, digital advertisements, marketing video, downloadable gated content, conducting and publishing primary research, guest blogging, live demos, podcasts, radio or other audio formats, and finally video blogging was down at 10%. And if you were kind of listening
Mm-hmm.
to that, roughly it's like roughly a linear drop from 55% for networking on social media down to 10% for video blogging. What's your perspective on that list? So that's the adoption rate, but if you're talking to a client, is are some people maybe not adopting techniques that are more effective, like video blogging, for example? That's
Yeah.
the least adopted, but are some of those maybe more effective and more people should be doing them?
Yeah, it's a very interesting relationship, Will, that you're kind of pointing out here. Adoption doesn't mean you do it well. That's and if you don't do it well, it isn't going to work. This is pretty much true for whatever kind of marketing technique you want, whether it's getting referrals or networking or digital or webinars or social media. And so what we learned is that the high growth firms not only adopt the techniques, but they do them better. And you see two things in particular. They devote more effort to it. For each technique they adopt, they're spending more time and more effort perfecting it. And they also tend to have a higher skill level. So greater skills, greater diligence with a well-selected technique is really what produces results. So it's not, think about it as taken out of the digital realm, out of the social media, and just, think of networking. If you went to a networking event, you strolled in, stopped over at the cheese dip, got a drink, and left, you wouldn't expect many results, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Everybody knows that'll never be successful. Well, it's the same thing with digital. If you adopt social media, but you never really use it, you don't apply it, and you don't really understand what you're doing or why you're doing it, you're not very likely to be successful.
Yeah. Tell me about this chart here, which is around where you actually show the marketing impact ratings. And I'm not going to read this full list, but I'll read the top 3 or 4. So,
Yeah.
in terms of what you saw as the highest marketing impact were digital product or service demonstrations. Number
Mm-hmm.
2 was presenting in educational webinars. Number 3 was conducting and publishing primary research, and number 4 was search engine optimization. Tell us a little bit about, for a firm that's doing those things well, like, why was the marketing impact higher than, let's say, actually the bottom one was was interviewing on podcasts. So
Don't
uh,
get depressed, Will. If
uh,
you do it right, it works.
I guess so. What makes tell us what would be so the very highest one was digital product or service demonstrations.
Uh-huh.
What does that look like? I'm not even sure what that means for a
Well,
professional services firm.
yeah, exactly. That's a bit confusing for some people. When we were talking just a moment ago about the importance of making your expertise tangible, there are many people in the consulting world who have either proprietary processes or they have some kind of combination of software and services that work together. And that they may combine into a package. So, what the digital demonstration is really what it sounds like, getting online with somebody and walking them through in a GoToMeeting or a Zoom type environment, walking them through what the process is or what the software is, how it works, what the outputs are, to make it tangible and real and specific. And we find that that's one of the most effective things because it allows the person to understand how you might be able to help them and impact them. Uh, so that I think that's one that people sometimes aren't sure about. Like, well, how would that apply to me? And think about it from the customer or the client's perspective and answer the question, what am I going to get? What
Mm-hmm.
is it going to look like? What is it going to be like? And the extent to which you can answer that question, you remove a lot of the risk from the client's internal calculation.
Okay.
Uh, some of the other ones are I think are so powerful, well, because they fit together. You take something like research, doing independent research. Now, think about if you do a research on your target audience. Let's say your target audience is plastic manufacturers, and you do a survey about them and you find out what certain practices are relevant to the kinds of services you do. What do they do? What are their issues? What's going on with them? And then you offer that survey. Here's the results about what's happening in the plastics manufacturing industry. How can they grow faster? How can they do this? How can they accomplish that? That is enticing to the people. And the people in the plastics manufacturing say, wow, that's relevant. I want to see that. So right away, you've got something that's of interest to your audience. Then you combine that with a webinar or with using content, some other way, distributing it in multiple ways. Then you have an integrated approach where you're gaining insight to your audience and you're providing feedback and a engaging piece of research to your audience that they want to see. And that sort of completes the circle of understanding. You understand them better, and you're conveying to them that you understand their issues and you have potential solutions.
So, having done all this work, would you say, I'd say a lot of consultants, myself included, sometimes feel like we're flailing around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the classic thing about advertising, which is, I know that 50% is wasted. I just don't know which 50%. A lot of us do all sorts of stabs at marketing. We're doing a blog, we're trying to appear on, get quoted in the newspaper, we're doing LinkedIn posts. You never really know what's most effective. What would you say would be any insights that you gained from this about, generally, are there some things that a lot of people are doing that's probably not that high impact, and that are there some kind of hidden opportunities that more people should be doing X or Y because it tends to be high impact but just a neglected approach?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of general secrets here, and then there's the right way to do it. So let me start with the secrets, and then I'll tell you the right way. The secrets are really that for a long time, the market has been moving in a digital direction. As a matter of fact, the more leads you get online, the faster you grow. That's a pretty well established relationship that we've seen in prior years and really comes through. And now with the COVID pandemic, I think that is going to do nothing but drive that harder. So if you want to learn which direction do I look, generally it's going to be you're looking in the digital direction. I would say so those just about anything in the digital direction. The second secret is don't flail around. Don't try so many different things. Settle on one or two or three things that you're doing consistently and you're doing very well over time. And that generally is the thing that leads to the most success, is fewer things done more competently and more consistently will drive greater results than, trying a half a dozen different things, any which might have worked, but you didn't spend enough time at it to really get good at it. So that's kind of the two things I think that really stick with me as important. Now, the right way to do it, though, is if you do a little bit of research first to figure out what channels are your clients on, your potential clients. You can do that by looking at their LinkedIn profiles, talking to them, figuring out, are they primarily webinars, or are they primarily, do they more interested in podcasts and so forth? So if you understand which channels, then you can kind of exhale, relax a little bit, and concentrate on really developing a program within a channel that your client is looking at. The second thing that's really important to get it right is making sure what you're talking about is relevant to them. And it's not just about how good you are, but is about understanding what is their challenge and how can your expertise speak to that challenge, help them understand that, frame it up so they really know how to move forward.
What in this survey surprised you or changed your thinking about the most effective marketing approaches?
I think the thing that surprised me most is how strong the digital disruption is getting. We have a chart in there that shows if the only thing you look at is a proportion of leads that you get online, what you find out is that the people who get most of their leads online, 2/3 or more, are growing more than twice as fast as those who get less than a third of their leads online. So, old-fashioned referrals, networking, the extent to which you can do that within our current environment, those still work. They didn't go away. But what's happening is buyers are spending more of their time just going online to educate themselves and to develop potential people that they might want to work with, their short list.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I can see that for really large firms that have the resources to invest in a powerful web presence. A Deloitte, a McKinsey, a Bain, a BCG. For more boutique firms or even independent consultants, what are the things that we can do practically to get a presence online and actually generate consulting leads online? Is it that you have to get super, super niche and specific? Or how can a boutique firm with 10 people or even an independent consultant actually generate leads online? I'd love to hear that.
Uh, and actually, the interesting thing is, in many ways, a smaller firm has advantages online because it can go after a niche. So I would say the first thing to do is figure out what exactly is the kind of client that you want more business with online. Second thing, once you understand that, figure out, okay, where can I intersect with them? Where can I show something that they will read and see? And if you only have one shot and you don't know anything else, I would say the trade publication that's most read in your industry is most likely the place. It could also be a blog post, and many industries have multiple trade publications. The third thing I would do is, once I figured that out, is I would figure out what is the issue that I can help my best clients solve, that I do my very best work on and that's easiest for me and I enjoy the most. What is that issue? And then I would write an article about that issue, put it in the trade publication, and then find a place to do, either on your own or with someone else, do a webinar on that topic that you put in the trade publication. So that gives you two channels: a webinar, which is probably one of the strongest, and a GIST publication in the trade. And you've done all of that without having to do any SEO, any particular thing. That's using mostly other people's platforms.
Now, I admit I am surprised to hear you advocating for webinars, um, because it seems to me that it's really tough to generate an audience for them. I mean, you could put one on, but how do you actually get people to come? So is it, yeah, let me just ask that. So, I mean, let's say you come up with a webinar. How do you go about inviting potential clients to sign up?
Uh, I would say one of the things I mentioned here is being on someone else's webinar. And if you are just getting started and you don't have a list of anyone that you've generated yourself, then I would try to partner with someone else who does have a list to promote to, or look for someone else where you can get they can help you as a paid promoter of the webinar. Many industries have webinars. For example, if you're selling to an industry where they need continuing professional education, let's say in the accounting or architecture or engineering, something like that, where there's a need for continuing education. There are usually organizations who offer those units, and you, as the advertiser, pays for for the attendees. So that's a way to do it, or partner with another type of organization who serves a similar type of client. We do a lot of this kind of work with our clients to develop and promote them. So it does take a little while to develop enough of a database to use on your own webinars, but you can shortcut that process by tagging on with someone else.
Okay. Let's say that you tag on with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
What do you advise your clients to do? So let's say you're going to be on someone else's webinar. What's the best way to try to get some leads from that? Usually, I don't know if the other person who sort of owns that webinar is going to be willing to give you the list of the people who have signed up to register for it. So you just give out your contact info and say, if you're curious, like reach out to me, or do you give some sort of bonus, like, hey, if you send me an email, I'll send you this nice gift of like this nice PDF or this report or something? How do you make maximum use of it if you, to get the attendees to actually contact you?
Well, the most important thing, and this may be a little bit counterintuitive, Will, is to give a really good, helpful webinar, not self-promotional, not gloss over, but give something that really demonstrates your expertise. And we find, almost independent of the offer and how much you try to promote your own services, giving a good webinar, people will follow up with that, whether you give them the opportunity or not. So that's just the basic, do that. But beyond that, typically, if you are in a situation where you have a paid partner in there, you will absolutely get access to the people who attend the webinar. The other alternative, which you mentioned, is to offer some kind of free or follow-up information. It might be, as you said, a special report, a reprint of that article that you had in the trade publication, a worksheet, or maybe even a free consultation with you. And any of those types of offers all seem to, all seem to work relatively well.
What's your tips on how to make webinars interactive to really engage the audience? Have you seen people doing a really nice job about that, of maybe having a live poll or a survey in the course of it, or have people ask questions? How do you make it so it doesn't just feel like you're watching a YouTube video?
Yeah. The I think polls and surveys and that, I think they're okay, but we seem to find the most kind of interaction is with questions. And we found that a couple things make it better. One is being able to take questions during the presentation, sort of as they come up, because the sooner you have the first question in it, the more total questions you'll get from the webinar. So if you have a question fairly early on in the first few minutes, you're likely to encourage more people to ask questions. And if you pause every once in a while to ask the questions that are answer the questions that are coming in, you'll find that it really helps people kind of stay engaged with it.
Now that makes sense. I'll offer one tip here that I found works pretty well, which is I use Mentimeter, Mentimeter, Mentimeter.com for doing polls and surveys.
Mm-hmm.
On Zoom, they do have a polling function, but it's pretty bad. They only have just sort of multiple choice where you can click a single question. But if you use Mentimeter, you can ask open-ended questions, and then everybody just goes to menti.com, puts in an access code on their phone. And I like to open webinars with a open-ended question, like, hey, what are you hoping to learn today, etc. And then you can actually see everybody else's responses on the screen, so it gets people like participating right away. And that that's been one thing that I found worked pretty well.
Sounds like a good tip.
Yeah. So getting back to the survey, in addition to the digital marketing, you do have a section there on more traditional marketing, and you show that in terms of the marketing impact ratings, the top most effective is providing assessments or consultations, and number two is just nurturing prospects through phone calls, and then networking at targeted events and speaking at targeted conferences or events. So let's talk about those top two. Providing assessments or giving some kind of short, like what's that mean? Some short diagnostic, or something very packaged and short. Tell us about like what you've seen effective there around giving people a quick assessment of their current state as a way to get engaged with them.
Yeah, what people often they're struggling with is trying to understand how should I approach this problem? What are my alternatives? What are the right kind of approaches? And I think the most straightforward and effective kind of thing you can do with that kind of a consultation is just simply listen to what the person describes to you about what the situation is that they're struggling with and what they're trying to accomplish, and then sharing with them what the alternatives are, what the alternative ways or alternative approaches are to managing that or handling that situation. And usually you're going to be doing that about situations you're very familiar with. Otherwise you wouldn't feel comfortable consulting on it. So I think, and I sort of use in this metaphor, for me, it's a little bit like in the grocery stores that you used to see. They would have a person at the end of the aisle giving you little samples of something.
Sure.
Little, here, try a little piece of this, or a wine tasting type thing. Try a little bit of this and see what you think. That's what you're doing. You're giving people a taste of what it's like to work with you. And if you think about it that way, then I think it greatly reduces the anxiety about, how will I handle it? Because what you're doing is what you do every day, what you do well, what you do naturally in most cases.
Let's talk about nurturing prospects through phone calls. What do you see as best practice there in terms of, let's say it's someone that maybe you know already, but you haven't worked for them recently. Maybe you did a project for them 2 years ago. Maybe you've never done a project. Someone that you knew in business school, whatever. What do you see as some of the best practices of picking up the phone, and like what do you talk about?
That's a great point. I think if you can have it any way you'd want, you'd think what would be the perfect kind of thing to talk about. A conversation that starts about, I came across this piece of research, or I came across this, or I had this incident and I thought about you. I thought you might want to learn about it, know something about it. So sharing something that's useful or helpful with a person, that when they hear you're calling, they're anxious to talk to you, because whenever they talk to you, they get something that's useful or helpful or interesting or funny. And I think that's kind of the way of keeping a relationship going and keeping your expertise in front of people. I know for some people getting on the phone is a barrier and they find it hard to do. But having something to talk about, a mission, usually makes that easier.
Okay. And do you recommend that people just pick up the phone and just dial direct, or which some people might be reluctant to do, or do you suggest, email the person, try to schedule a time? It's a little bit more administratively cumbersome, but what do you see working best?
I think there's an element of style and preference here, about what you would like your client, what impression you want to be giving to your clients, what's consistent with who you are. So I don't know that we have any research that shows that scheduling an appointment to talk ahead of time is more or less effective than just picking up the phone and leaving a message if you don't get them. I kind of prefer picking up a phone and leaving a message because you can explain a little bit about what you want to talk about. And in most cases, that's going to be, if it's something positive and something useful, that moves you a step closer. Whereas, if you're not comfortable leaving a message, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to approach it by email or messaging.
Yeah, I guess the guidance that I've heard in the past, and what David A. Fields recommends is just going ahead and just picking up the phone and calling. And if they don't pick up, then leave a message,
Hmm.
as opposed to emailing it, just a different burden. And then the person is saying, oh, well, I don't have time this week or next week. Yeah, let's grab
Yep.
time, 3 weeks from
Well,
now.
that's why to be effective when you're emailing, you have to be clear in your emailing about what you're talking, why you want to talk to them, and make sure that there's enough value in there so the person is going to say, "Heck yeah, I
Yeah.
want to talk to you."
Yeah, no, one school of thought suggests that um, you shouldn't necessarily try to add value every time you contact someone, because it's a big burden on us to, so people might be more reluctant to reach out, because they think, oh, well, first I have to go find some good article or some good reason to call, and it might be sufficient just to call a person and say, hey, it's been a while, it's been 6 months, just thinking about you, want to check in, see what's new in your universe. What's your perspective on that approach?
Uh, I think that works if you have enough of an established relationship with the person, so you're pretty sure that talking to you is a high enough priority to get over the all the other things that they have to do in that day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if it's you got a very warm, close relationship, I think that's just fine. But someone you don't know particularly well, I get multiple calls every day, people leaving messages about why they want to talk to me, and they want to schedule something with no indication of why or what's in it for me, or why would we want to talk? And of course, that's not going to work very well.
Yeah. How do you recommend that professional services firms that have limited time and limited budget for marketing put together a complete marketing plan, and like how to allocate their resources across all of the kind of things that they could be doing? They could be creating content, they could be doing one-on-one calls, they could be trying to go speak at conferences, they could be doing a video blog. How do you figure out what are the right tactics for your firm,
Hmm.
and how to allocate your time and budget across those different things?
Well, that's something actually we know quite a bit about because we do a lot of that for firms. And I think what I would recommend for someone is kind of a three-step process. Step number one is do some research so you understand two things that are absolutely essential. You have to understand where your client looks, or your potential clients, where they look for information and insight. So that tells you where you want to go with it, with your limited resources. The second thing I would do is I would cross that with either a copy of this study that we offer the executive summary for free to people. Look at and see what are the most effective techniques, and which ones do I, as an individual, which ones do I feel comfortable with. So if you have, here's the most effective techniques, and here's where my people, here's where the people I'm trying to reach are at, that's going to tell you which techniques do I want to use. So that's one important thing. Second important thing is figuring out what do I want to talk about, and what kind of content. And there you look at what are the you ask yourself, or preferably you ask the potential clients, so you understand what are the key issues that they're struggling with, where you might be relevant. And that might not be on the surface just what you think it is. You may be relevant in a way that you might not understand initially. You might what you do might be helpful to someone. Uh, Once you understand that, how you can be helpful, what their issues are, and where to be, that provides a basis of what your marketing plan should be. Then the only other piece you need is really to understand, things like how frequently are you going to be doing this? And that's sort of a matter of, the more you do it, the better the results you'll get. So you can choose how much effort you want to devote to it.
Could you spend a minute telling us a bit about Hinge and how you work with clients?
Yeah, the Hinge is, we call it branding and marketing, but what we really do is we made a couple decisions a number of years ago when I got involved with Hinge. I was initially a client of Hinge's, and I sold the consulting firm I had, and really got involved with Hinge, and we came up with a plan that made sense. Number one is we were going to base everything we did on research, what worked. We didn't care whether it was something we liked to do or didn't like to do, or, it wasn't what we wanted to do, it was what works. Number two is we said we're going to do it ourselves before we do it with our client. And that has proven to be tremendously helpful because it allows us to speak with confidence and certainty about how things work and they don't work, or what they work, or what we can help you with. And then finally, we were going to focus on a very narrow niche, and that is the professional services marketplace, and only that marketplace. And we weren't going to be tempted by a big brand that comes along and wants you to do something else. And those three things have really allowed us to develop a practice that really focuses on helping professional services firms grow and grow quickly.
That's great. Where can people go online to find out more about your firm?
The URL is hingemarketing.com. Hinge like the thing that opens doors, and marketing just like it sounds.
All right, great. And we'll include that link in the show notes. Lee, it was great speaking with you again. Thanks so much for being on the show.
It was my pleasure, Will. Thanks for having me.